Hi folks, welcome to what day of the week is this? Tuesday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. I have, as normal, Jimmy Hutton and Stuart Lockhead with me. I'm Norrie Stewart. We all watched Nicola Sturgeon's presser today, and it's definitely moving into the political domain now. People are starting to look and question decisions made with the benefit of hindsight to try and catch her out. What did you think, Jimmy?
Well, it's James Matthews the Sky kind of led the unionist pile-on with a question about a freedom of information request, asking for details of written briefings that the First Minister had been given in January and February. And there were quite a few, shall we call them the usual unionist suspects who piled in on that one. I'm looking at it, and it is definitely hindsight-y, and I'm kind of wondering though, is this somewhat of a backhanded compliment, given that they've finally accepted that the Scottish Government is handling this whole pandemic thing relatively well, and now they want to go right back to January and February and second-guess decisions made then whilst applying knowledge that we have now, particularly around asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic testing, which even now, on the 2nd of June, we're not sure how effective testing is for asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic people. But it seems a strange wave of attack, but it was definitely coordinated. And looking at Twitter, it was definitely coordinated, because the minute it came up, loads of people piled in on Twitter as well.
Stuart, you've got a bit of a bee in your bonnet about asymptomatic anyway.
Yes, that's for sure. Let me cover what I wrote quite a lot of notes. I don't trust that Jim Matthews at all. As soon as I saw freedom of information requests, yes, they're an essential part of transparency, of holding their government to account. However, there is something called phishing FOI requests. And this was very phishing, because there was no specifics, none at all, anything at all that you've got around between the 24th of January and the 9th of March. Any written briefings. So the first, they wanted details. Yeah, right. You want to know what time the bloody toilets were blocked or whatever.
Stuart, I wonder if Sky News or any of the organisations that piled in behind them today have ever asked for that amount of information from the Westminster Government.
Very good point. So the First Minister said, well, I get lots of direct briefings, and they're not all, basically, she says, and she gets so many briefings, they're not all written, because the request is for written briefings, and they're not all written. I get briefings every day.
Well, rather than go into the details, Stuart, I'll show you the clip.
Well, he said, I will if necessary, get the details. There's no way anybody could ever answer the question.
Here's the clip.
Do you want to add you?
No, I'm all right.
Okay.
Sorry.
And lastly today, Mark McLaughlin from The Times.
Oh, the same topic.
Yeah.
Hello, First Minister. I just want to clarify the point you made on Sunday about the advice you were given in the early stages. I don't want to go back over the answers that you gave to Michael and Simon and indeed Sophie Ridge about the measures you took, just the advice that you were given. You said back then, prior to April 22, the view was that people who didn't have symptoms, either because they were pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic, didn't shed the virus, when the actual advice from SAGE and the WHO was asymptomatic was low, pre-symptomatic was low but higher. So the risk wasn't nil. And also on the 26th of February, the date of the night conference, incidentally, Philippa Whitford, the SNP Health and Care spokeswoman, asked Matt Hancock about asymptomatic transmission. She said, quotes, "We are aware that the case that spread the condition to others in the UK involved someone who was not significantly symptomatic. So on Sunday, did you maybe just underplay the advice that you were given?
No, I don't think I did. I have never said that at any point we were told the risk of asymptomatic transmission was nil, or that it wasn't something being discussed. I don't think with a new virus, anybody on any aspect of it would have been that definitive. But what I have said, and what I absolutely maintain is, and I think anybody who has been dealing with this would maintain, is that the knowledge and the evidence around asymptomatic transmission has changed significantly as we've gone through this. I mean, you, I think, drew our attention to some quotes earlier this week, which you know, you have, as your right to do, pulled out some particular aspects of these quotes. But sometimes if you read all of them, you see exactly the point I'm making. So, you know, a WHO briefing on the 25th of February, I'm quoting here, you know, with asymptomatics, it doesn't look like that's a big part of the picture. On 28th of February, a WHO report, the proportion of truly asymptomatic infections is unclear, but appears to be relatively rare and does not appear to be a major driver of transmission. Again, in March, asymptomatic transmission is not a major driver of transmission. You know, as recently as April the 2nd, again in a WHO situation report, there has been no documented asymptomatic transmission. You know, so nobody has ever said it was nil. You wouldn't be able to say that, but it is absolutely the case that our knowledge and understanding of it has developed, and as it has developed, we have adapted our response accordingly.
So,
yeah, no, absolutely, Norrie.
well, the real point of that is the question was framed in such a way that he wanted to be really, really specific. You know, I don't want to hear about what you did with the advice you got. What I want is for you to admit you got advice that you have, in one of these numerous briefings, basically told us a fib.
Well,
That's what I want you to admit.
Yeah, well, I told you before we started recording, I took notes from this guy, Mark McLaughlin, and I wrote down halfway through his question, he's lying. He was lying. He was making things up. I have followed this topic very closely, right from the start. And I'm probably up to speed more than that man is. And the First Minister really dealt with it very professionally.
I think tomorrow she needs to come out with a barrow with 8 file boxes on it and go, what was that date? I'll just look through all this information that's passed over my desk in the last 3 months.
Norrie, you get the impression that some of these journalists, they wouldn't even be satisfied with that. They wouldn't be satisfied if they were sat on Nicola Sturgeon's lap when she was given the information. They'd still think she was interpreting it in the wrong way, and they'd still think that somehow that she was fibbing to them and keeping stuff for them.
But that brings me back to the phrase I used yesterday. Hindsight, the hammer of the unreasonable. This is what's going to happen. They're going to pick out a single quote. Now, she had, what, 3-4 quotes there from the World Health Organization, essentially saying, at the moment, we don't know the level of
Well, that one on, that last one, April the 2nd, that there had been no asymptomatic transmission at the start of April. That's vital if that's the WHO opinion, because they're trying to absolutely nail her on asymptomatic transmission at the start of this thing, at January, February time.
They didn't know then, and they can't be absolutely certain now. But one thing they have decided to announce in the last 10 days is that the average gap between someone getting infected to passing it on is only 4 days.
Yeah, that's changed markedly.
And frequently, people don't have any symptoms until after 4 days. So people are getting infected and passing it on asymptomatic.
Where did that come from, that information, Stuart?
Oh, I can find it. It's a scientific paper. I can pass it to you.
The last thing I saw from the World Health Organization was that it appeared that the risk of infection from asymptomatic people was extremely low, and they had no definitive proof that it happened.
Well, this is within the last 10 days of scientific papers. I follow them every day.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, either way, it really doesn't affect whatever these stupid questions are that these stupid reporters are asking. Honestly,
Yeah, well,
halfway through that question, I wrote down, he's lying.
Jimmy.
I think it was deliberate, mate. I think the whole campaign today, the whole presser, was to create a stooshy, because there's a stooshy in England at the moment that they don't want us to concentrate on at all. The ONS stats came out again today. Yet again, England is telling the world that 20% of their deaths were in care homes and up to that particular date. So yet again, England, with the worst death, or amongst the worst death rates on the planet, is doing way, way better than every other country in terms of death rate in care homes. Or alternatively, as the head of the UK Stats Authority has hinted at, England are manipulating their statistics for political purposes.
Well,
Never.
every time those stats come out, the journalists at the Downing Street Presser should be asking the question, okay, all those deaths that are unaccounted for, 25% of deaths that you have no reason for, you need to find a reason for those deaths to have occurred.
And they're not questioning them, mate. They're just letting it slide. It's horrific.
I'm going to repeat what we said the other day. The Prime Minister himself said, when it comes to international comparisons, the only thing that he'll accept is excess deaths. In other words, compared to the average before the coronavirus came along, where are we now? And that you can measure that abroad, and on that basis, England is the worst in the world.
Well, I mean, the press not asking that question is, to me, unbelievable. I mean,
I can understand why they don't, mate. At the end of the day, the press are Tories, or most of the press are Tories in England, and there is a political purpose behind this. I think, well, I'm a cynic, mate, you know that. I think the Tories are deliberately downplaying what's happened in care homes because 20% of their vote have got care homes looming in the future by the time the next election comes round. That might be a bit cynical, but the reality is they've obfuscated stats on deaths. They've obfuscated stats on new cases. And they have deliberately misled people on how the number of tests that they are doing. And they've done that for a political purpose. So I don't think you can trust anything that comes out of London anymore.
But I don't suppose we should be surprised. They're prepared to lie about just about everything.
Aye.
Well, let's move on. Let's go international.
Yeehaw.
We can't really avoid what's happening in America. It's like we're in a parallel universe at the moment. The leader of the so-called free world is about to mobilize the army against his own people. What is going on?
Well, let me suggest what might be going on. Obviously, there's a genuine anger. It's been going on for years. Police killing black people. This has been going on forever and a day. And of course, them not being prosecuted or not convicted. And to be honest, we have evidence that this has been going on in this country too. But it's a huge issue in America. And it seemed to explode with the George Floyd case, because the video is 8 minutes long of the man being slowly killed by a policeman. And it's absolutely electrified the world. And then, of course, it very quickly turned to riots. Peaceful protests turned to riots. Now, that suits the Trump position, because he can then bring in the army and be strong leader and defend the people. But there is some evidence that some of the people that started these riots were white right-wing fascists. And then today there's now a report of, I think, 4 or 5 policemen have been shot. Now, I have no idea who shot them, have they? They could just as easily been shot by white. They're the ones with all the guns, after all. They brought their guns out just to get a haircut a month ago.
Well, I did tweet yesterday that to Bella Caledonia, strangely enough, the argument of America's gun lovers, the Rifle Association and the right wing especially, is that they need guns because the Second Amendment gives them guns to protect themselves against the government. And here's the government telling the same right-wing fascists to go out with their guns and shoot people.
Mm-hmm.
So the argument about the Second Amendment protecting you from the government falls away immediately. But it's the argument that they always deploy when somebody wants some sort of gun control introduced.
Yeah, well, last night was ludicrous, mate. I think it was just Trump's ego reacting to the bad press that he got for hiding in his bunker on Sunday night. Last night was horrific.
So what we'll do is we'll go out, we'll disperse peaceful demonstrators
outside the White House
with gas and rubber bullets.
Aye.
So I can walk unmolested down the street to a church where we've dispersed the priests who are outside and hold up a Bible that I've never read.
Aye, well, take a look at that footage, folks, if you've not seen it yet. The people protesting last night outside the White House, there wasn't a radical amongst them. Talk about peaceful protests. You were talking about veterans in wheelchairs and everything that were there. And suddenly, because Trump wanted to make a show of strength and look like a tough guy, the police attacked them with flashbangs, tear gas and batons just to clear the path for Donald to walk in a ring of steel from probably the most heavily protected installation in America to a church that was just across the road, to hold up a Bible and make some spurious photo op that makes him look presidential. The man's a clown. And just before he done that, his press conference in the Rose Garden, he effectively drove a coach and horses through the United States Constitution. He cannot put American troops on American soil to uphold law and order. It is strictly against the Constitution of the United States. He has to be asked for that assistance by the governors, and they ain't going to do it other than the dipshit Republicans who do everything Donald tells them to, and there are a few out there.
I mean, what is the average IQ of Republicans? How can they stand by and watch this?
It beggars belief that there are so many people in that party so wedded to the desire to keep the White House Republican that they will turn a blind eye to anything that this man does.
Well, it's a bit like people they'll do almost anything to keep Cummings in his job, just to achieve Brexit. They'll do anything to keep Trump as president and get a second term, just because of what he stands for. There's a lot of people in America support him.
You've got some of the most middle of the road commentators on the planet calling him a dictator.
Well, you can't. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean,
I know.
That's America, but I mean, look what's happening in our own parliament. I mean, Rees-Mogg seems to have got the taste of power and decided that he needs to exercise it. I mean, they have a system in place, a virtual voting system, and he's just going to shut it down and force everybody to come back into Parliament. The only reason can be to make it look like government policy, opening schools, etc., allowing shielded people or recommending shielded people no longer need to shield. And he needs Parliament full of people so that he can justify the policy. It's bloody madness.
It's crazy, mate. It is absolutely crazy. And the worrying thing is, are the British press, they're not asking enough questions about this again, but are the British people just going to wear this because Jacob's got a beautiful cut glass English accent and the people of England have been kind of trained over the last few centuries to tug their forelock the minute somebody talks to them in a posh accent? Are we going to just sit by whilst effectively half the MPs in the House of Commons are told, your vote doesn't matter, we're pushing this through and your constituents don't matter. If you choose not to turn up and go along with this, then your constituents will be taxed, but they won't be represented.
You're asking a question, Jimmy. Will we stand by? And it looks like, yes, we will.
It does, it certainly looks that way, mate. I've no idea why so many people in Scotland are upset that some SNP MPs have decided to travel down there. They've got to go down and at least make a fist of trying to oppose this. But the reality is it will be pushed through. At that point, I don't think we will withdraw our MPs, will we? I think we've often talked about it, but this is an opportunity for all of Scotland's MPs, other than the Tories and Murray, who's effectively a Tory anyway, to just walk out and say, you know what, Scotland will sort its own self out. We'll go back to Scotland and we'll look after our own. There's
no point Ian Murray being at Westminster, because his whole existence now is about attacking the SNP at Holyrood.
Mm-hmm.
Who's he going to attack down there? There'll no be Boris the Unionist pal. The other thing that is worth mentioning is they've used this is the UK government, have used the situation in America to hold on to a report. They're not going to publish a report on BAME deaths in association with coronavirus, because it might incite racial riots, I suppose.
Increase racial tensions.
So what does it say?
I think what increases racial tensions is the fact that there are more people from black and minority ethnic backgrounds dying of coronavirus.
Well,
I think they know that.
That's all it can say.
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to explain.
Interesting, Norrie, that we don't have that stat up here. Scotland seems to be very much an outrider on that one. I believe it's as much as 50% less deaths in the BAME community in Scotland than there are in the UK BAME community, which is, I've no idea why. I've no idea whatsoever, but it's an interesting point to note.
I think what we might find is that we have less deaths in frontline staff, and we have a smaller proportion of the BAME community working on the front line. I have no idea. I don't know.
Aye, it could be that. You're right.
Guessing. Who knows? It'll come out in the wash.
But this is just typical of Westminster using. I mean, you've got to wonder if they've run out of paper or something there, that they're stopping publishing so many reports all at the same time. Is there a paper shortage that we're not getting talked about?
Well, the other thing is that 550 odd deaths that they forgot to mention yesterday.
Aye, that's a strange one.
The death total was 111, and they just forgot about these 500 that we just won't mention that.
Yeah, as I say, mate, there's an awful lot of. It's noticeable the scrutiny that the Scottish government is under constantly. If the UK government was under that level of scrutiny, it would have fallen by now. They just do not apply the same standards to Westminster that they do to Holyrood. And it's embarrassing. It must be embarrassing to them to be able to be encouraged to question quite so closely one level of government and then be actively told not to do the same to another level of government.
I think they're terrified that they're not going to be allowed to question them at all. I think they believe that this government in Westminster would be prepared to stop the daily pressers, would be simply not to engage with the press.
I notice they're stopping the weekend ones, mate, and they're frighteningly or laughably, they're citing the fact that people don't watch it. The ratings aren't high enough, so they're no longer going to do weekend briefings from London, which is just, surely these things aren't done for ratings. They're done to disseminate information, and it doesn't matter how many people watch it. The information gets out there, and the information then grows arms and legs and gets elsewhere itself.
I think you're actually wrong about that, Jimmy. They're done in order to spin information, not to deliver information.
Yeah, you
Stuart,
might be right.
do you enjoy the Downing Street pressers?
I've only watched one in the last 3 weeks. They're a waste of time.
Oh, I like to watch them to basically to see who they put up as the spokesperson.
Basically, if there's anything said that's worth seeing, there'd be something in the front pages. Nothing's been happened. I mean, I've not missed anything.
Not a lot, mate. You're right. If anything's worth saying at Westminster, you get a good take on it for the likes of Channel 4 News and what have you.
I just haven't come back. I don't. What am I supposed to say? We've still got Dominic Cummings, who thinks he can walk on water.
Sorry, who can walk on water?
Oh, yeah, sorry, he can walk on water.
Metaphorically.
I don't think there's nothing much new in the last few days about him, apart from the fact that he can still walk on water. Nothing's happened. It's all very bad news. Nobody's rioting outside Westminster. Nobody's occupying buildings in Whitehall. Nothing's happening against us, apart from the fact everybody's going to the beach at Bournemouth.
Are we, as a nation, at the stage now where we're so used to being lied to and manipulated that we've become apathetic to it?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Well, where's the evidence? I mean, people used to get more excited about animals being used for experiments.
Oh, if the Tories was to start torturing dogs, there'd be an outcry.
Do you remember when people used to occupy trees to stop roads being built? Let alone people's lives at stake. Nothing happens anymore. They're a totally cowed population.
When things get back to normal.
What normal?
And the English people realise, the people of England realise that the Tories have just passed legislation, the EU bill, which allows you to torture animals effectively, then they'll get upset.
Nah, mate. The people of England are cows. Stuart's right. I think it's you can where our politics lie. I think this is an opportunity to tell them to ram it. Stick your parliament where the sun don't shine. As I say, bring the MPs home.
In the
have
end,
a grand meeting of all the Scottish representatives, even the Labour and Tory ones. You've got to have a few dissenting voices. And if they choose not to turn up to that one, fine. And then just say, you know what, the Scottish election next year is a plebiscite on Scottish independence, regardless of whether you want to take part or not.
Still going to be, well, you're going to have to get the local authorities on board for that one. In a practical sense. Okay, guys.
We also got to sort out our judiciary as well. Otherwise, they might decide to come along and say, oh, you've had your referendum, but it's not legal.
Oh, well, I've no doubt it'll go through the courts. I mean, even if they get a huge landslide, it'll go through the courts.
Scottish courts will have nothing to do with it, mate. It'll be the International Court of Justice that decides this one. Fortunately, whoever is twisting Chambers Street into an absolute disgrace of what it is becoming now, whoever's behind all that, they'll have nothing to do with the constitutional question. That'll be decided elsewhere.
Well, I mean, it's going to go to the highest court in the world. There's no doubt about that. Anybody got any particular personal bits?
Nah, no funnies, mate.
No funnies.
I think it's Coups Day. I think that's Jimmy used to always put up a picture of a coup on Facebook on a Tuesday.
I did, mate, but I've decided that I'm far better off talking to one's earth these days.
One's earth.
But it struck me at the time that I thought the reason you picked Tuesday for Coups Day was there's nothing else happened there on a Tuesday.
It was weirdly, mate, I think it initially started with the National Trust or one of the bodies like that that I tapped onto. But people often accuse me of talking like it in my coups there. So
did I see that our unionist historian Neil, what's his name?
Yeah, that's the one. Neil Oliver.
He's been bumped.
No, as far as I know, mate.
I think I'd know.
I thought he'd maybe resigned. Well, not as much
Well, I think
as I hoped.
I think the entire organisation's up the Bold Creek and they have no paddle. They've been begging the Scottish Government for an awful lot of money, and I think it looks awfully like the Scottish Government are going to let them fold because, let's be honest, we've got Scottish Natural Heritage and other bodies that could do the National Trust job without having any of the strange political output into decision making.
It does seem odd to me
National
that
Trust
some of the richest people in Scotland, when their big house starts falling down, they can donate it to the nation. The nation then looks after it and picks it all up so it stops falling down, and they continue to live in it. That's a nice deal. I wouldn't mind that deal.
Again, see, you keep making me do this. It's not as clear cut as that. You've got to allow the public access.
But some of that access can be very restricted.
Yeah, do a deal with them.
One day a year, show them around the house. There you go.
Aye. There's where the horses live. There's where I dump. You're not getting to see the rest of the place.
Well, I think they have to give you access to the main residence. That will have to be looked at. But as you say, they still get a house done up for night.
Yeah.
As I say, mate, there's plenty of bodies out there. Royal Commission on Ancient Monuments. There's plenty of bodies out there that don't have the political bent that the National Trust for Scotland does.
Historic Scotland.
So let them go, and it gets rid of Neil Oliver.
Thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for being with me, Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norrie Stewart.
Cheerio.
And we'll no doubt catch up with you tomorrow, guys. And listeners, we'll see you later, folks. Cheers for now.